There aren't many of us left that can tell of their experiences of the atrocities they saw and witnessed that Nazi Germany inflicted upon the Jewish population in Europe during World War II. Over the years, people have asked me what I had been through in the Army and what I had seen during my service years. Do I ever think about those days? And my answer is always the same: yes. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't think about the horror of Nordhausen and the concentration camp that I had liberated. My story begins on March 7, 1942. I was inducted into the Army. I was sent to Camp Upton, upstate New York, and I was there for 2 days, and then sent to Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, for my basic training. From there, I was sent to Fort Sam Houston, San Antonio, Texas. 3 months later, I was sent to Camp Polk, Louisiana, and my next camp was Camp McCain, Mississippi. From Camp McCain, I was then sent to the staging area, Camp Reynolds, Pennsylvania, and from there to Camp Edwards, Massachusetts, for a shipment to the European Theater of Operations. After zigzagging across the Atlantic Ocean for 14 days, we arrived in Liverpool, England. There, trucks were waiting for us to be taken to the 10th Replacement Center in Birmingham, England. While in Birmingham, we were awakened every morning about 4:30 a.m. and told to fall out with full field pack and our duffel bags packed, ready for the invasion of France at any given time. This went on for several weeks until June 6, 1944, when we were awakened by a tremendous roar overhead. Running out of our tents and looking skyward, we observed a sky full of planes, bombers with gliders attached, fighter planes, and we immediately knew that the invasion was on and that we would in all probability be on our way also. The armada of planes were all headed for the English Channel. About a week later, we were once more awakened a little earlier than 4:30 a.m. and told to fall out with all our equipment and told to be ready to move out as soon as everyone was assembled. But to our surprise, this was the real thing. We were told to place our barracks bags on one of the trucks, and when our names were called, to call out our Army serial number and get on one of the other trucks. Once we were on the trucks, we moved out quickly and we were on our way. We traveled all day and all night across England to the port of Plymouth, where once again we had to call out our names and serial number and board the ship that was anchored there to cross the English Channel to France. It took us one complete day and one night to cross due to enemy planes trying to stop our convoy. Once we were in sight of the French coast, we were ordered to climb down a rope ladder to an assault craft waiting to take us to shore at Omaha Beach. Getting into the assault craft was no problem. But the trip to shore was. That was the first time I felt like throwing up crossing on water, that I felt sick. But the Army had given us paper sacks if we did. I don't know whether it was from the stench of the craft or fright of landing on Omaha Beach and what we were about to encounter. Once we landed on shore, we were told to load our rifles and to fire in any event. There were German prisoners already assembled on the beach, glaring menacingly at us, but we ignored them as we started down the road to St. Mary-Église, to a replacement center that had been set up there, and at that point we were attacked by enemy aircraft. And as we had learned our maneuvers over and over again, we immediately hit the ditches that were on the side of the road the French farmers used to walk their cows on. As we saw the dirt road come alive with machine gun bullets trying to hit us as we walked, I and another soldier jumped into a ditch filled with muddy water, and we came up smelling, and we stunk. What took, I would estimate, about a couple of minutes of being under attack seemed like an eternity laying there in that dirty water. At last, someone yelled, "They're gone." We got out of the filth we were laying in, And looking back, we saw the planes flying off in the distance. Looking at each other, we started to laugh from fright and nervous tension of the attack. And as I had said before, we stunk. Two of our men were hurt. One was with a badly sprained ankle, and the officer in charge of us seemed to have gone berserk, walking around mumbling incoherently. We then commandeered a truck passing by and asked the driver to take us to the nearest field hospital, leaving the two injured men there. And then we continued to the staging area. There, we were told, we would stay in all probability about an hour or two at the longest, and then be assigned to a permanent company. My name was called about a half hour later that was to join the 50th Signal Battalion, Company B, attached to the 7th Corps under the command of General Joseph Lawton Collins. Our command post was located at St. Mary Glees. After breaking through at St. Lo, we proceeded through Belgium and wound up in the city named Eupen, Belgium, bordering Germany, and the famous dragon teeth, the Siegfried Line, that Hitler bragged to the world no one would ever penetrate. The dragon teeth, as we had named them, consisted of cement stanchions about 3 feet high and about as wide as a normal city street. We broke through those dragon teeth on September 15th, 1944, and set up communications in a city by the name of Cornelia-Munster. About a week at that location, we were once again ordered to move out. From there, we started taking city after city until we entered the city of Nordhausen, the supposed wine capital of Europe. Upon entering the city, we immediately noted the smell of grapes and also the distinctive odor, pungent to our noses, of death. It's a type of odor you don't readily forget as hardened combat soldiers. They were dead somewhere or something close by. We couldn't determine where the smell came from for the moment until our trucks came around a corner of a building where we were supposed to set up our communications, and the sight we encountered was the most shocking of the war so far. We couldn't believe our eyes. There in front of us were hundreds of dead as far as the eye could see. Jews, gypsies, and other denominations laying there murdered, some with clothes on, some naked, all looking like skeletons, having been starved for some time. This we didn't expect. It was just horrible. General Collins was notified, and he observed the scene firsthand. He was very angry at what he observed. As he walked slowly surveying the scene of destruction, he then ordered the Army engineers to bring in backhoes and start digging a large communal grave to bury these unfortunates, and most of all, he ordered the MPs to gather up all the German population around the area, men, women, children, to get whatever transportation available to carry, if necessary, these unfortunates to the grave that the engineers were digging. The German civilians were assembled, either going to work or shopping. All of us said, "Ich bin nicht schuldig. I don't know anything about this. I'm not guilty of this." But we didn't believe them because the stench alone should have been enough to know that something was amiss. We liberated the city of Nordhausen. Once again, after a short stay at Nordhausen, we pushed further on as the German army was being pushed further back towards Berlin. We once again liberated the city of Halle. I'm not quite sure whether it was Halle and the baby factory that was set up there. What is a baby factory? As we named it, a baby factory consisted of young women, perhaps from 18 to possibly 25 or 26, or possibly a little older, blonde, blue-eyed, pure Aryan descent, no Jewish blood mixed in going back for generations. And their primary function there was to service Hitler's elite SS troops, also blonde, blue-eyed, and to produce a pure Aryan nation of blonde, blue-eyed children for the German fatherland. Some of the women there were already pregnant. December started out extremely cold, about the coldest Europe had ever seen in a long while. Also very dreary and snowing practically every day. About the middle of December, the Germans started their offensive. It was snowing hard, and that was the start of the Battle of the Bulge. Our forces weren't able to counter the offensive and the Germans had put up, and being caught by surprise, and our forces were suffering with many casualties at an alarming rate. As we started to retreat, the German tanks, with their 88 cannons, was taking a heavy toll on our positions as we retreated back towards Belgium. We continued retreating further back, and all the progress we had made was disappearing slowly. Once again, we found ourselves back in the city of the Cornelia-Monster. After 3 weeks of retreating and snowing, we finally caught a break. It had stopped snowing, and the 8th Air Force was out in full force, with bombers, fighter planes strafing the German positions, stopping the German offensive. And once again we started our own offensive, trying to take back the territory we had lost. The weather being very cooperative, clear and sunny, but very cold. It was then that we learned the 1st Infantry had many casualties, as did my company also. At last our company was taken out of the line and sent to the rear for rest, new clothes, hot showers, new boots, and most of all, good food, instead of K rations or C rations. Up until that time, I hadn't taken my clothes off in the past 3 weeks. From the start of the retreat, I was either sitting at a switchboard, manning a machine gun, or trying to catch a cat nap for sleep, while retreating with the rest of my company. My company was in Liège, Belgium, resting until further orders came through. Once again we were ordered to get back into action, and again we entered Germany, same place, Cornelia-Monster, where once again we set up communications. At last we received word to move out and go forward behind the 1st Infantry Division until we reached the Rhine River. At that time I happened to be on the switchboard and overheard that the Remagen Bridge was taken intact. I immediately called my battalion commander to inform him, and he told me to call all our company commanders to report to his headquarters for instructions. With the bridge now intact and in Allied hands, we crossed the Rhine River, and once again we were taken out for R&R. It had been hard fighting until the Allies had gotten to this point. We wound up at a fancy hotel with real beds, and we were able to relax comfortably. This was a resort of some kind. Once again back in action and pushing the Germans back further into Germany, on April of 1945, we wound up in Mannheim, Germany. It was there we received the news that President Roosevelt had died. We all wondered what would happen next and where we would go. The war did go on, and the Germans being pushed back more and more, with the war on the two fronts, with the Russians now in Berlin fighting house to house on the Eastern Front, and the Americans and the British on the Western Front. We were told the 7th Corps was going on to Leipzig to possibly cross the Elbe River to Berlin. I and several others of the telephone platoon was to stay behind for rear echelon communications to SHAEF headquarters, which was now located in Paris. Our squad moved up into a small town under the command of a lieutenant. The rest of our company moved on to Leipzig. I was in this town for about 2 days and had drawn the 8 p.m. until the 4 a.m. shift, and it was a very quiet night on the board. We decided that one man would sleep for 4 hours while the other manned the board, unless it got busy, and the other would do the same. At last our crew was relieved by the new crew, and we were now off for 24 hours. We slept, wrote letters, and ate K rations for breakfast. One of the operators, or it might have been me, suggested we take a walk and see what the countryside looked like, packing our musette bags with the essentials and, of course, the famous K rations. 6 of us started out on this walk. As we came to the edge of the town, there was a group of trees, and as we cleared the trees, I noticed a road as we headed for that road. As we walked slowly, I noticed a compound with barbed wire and a deep silence. We became weary of the silence and placed our rifles in our hands, fixed our bayonets on in case we encountered any straggling German troops that still resisted being captured, or any hand-to-hand fighting. We had 1 clip of bullets in our rifles and 8 rounds and 2 other clips of bullets in our belts. We walked slowly but alert for any signs of danger, and looking to the left, I saw a barbed wire fence with a sort of razor type of wire on top. Also, there were small groups of people milling around watching us, thin, weary, like walking skeletons, shuffling around, looking up. I noticed large towers about 50 feet apart at intervals that overlooked the compound. I then realized that this was a concentration camp that we had read about in our newspaper, The Stars and Stripes. These individuals were with raggedy clothes were staring at us and once again cautioned the others to keep a sharp eye out and be careful. As we approached the locked gate, I also noticed their dirty striped clothes, Stars of David, hanging from these dirty gray uniforms, or whatever you want to call them. The gate had a lock on it, and I told one of the men to shoot the damn thing off, which one of them did, and we opened the gate, walking in very slowly, our guns ready, our bayonets fixed, and the crowd milling around there closest to the gate started backing away from us, and we cautiously looked around, and I approached one man that seemed to be the spokesperson because the group was all around him, and I pointed to him and in my best German dialogue asked, "Du, was ist Ihr Namen?" He seemed frightened, for one, that we shot the lock off, and 2, that we had our rifles and bayonets pointed at them. And they saw a uniform they didn't know of. But he replied, Schmuel. Again I asked him, "Wo seien die deutsche Soldaten?" And in a frightened voice he answered, "Sie haben weggelaufen." Then I asked him again, only this time I lowered my voice to a normal sound, "Wie lang und wie haben Sie gegangen?" He answered, "Ich weiß nicht. Kann sein eine Stunde, kann sein 2. Sie haben weggelaufen in the Felder," pointing to the woods. I then thought to myself, what the heck am I speaking to him in German? He's a Jew, and I'm a Jew. I'll speak to him in Jewish. I'm sure he'll be more comfortable hearing it spoken by someone in a uniform. So in my best Jewish accent, I asked him, this time smiling, "Von wann kommt ihr?" Suddenly, there was a look of apprehension in his face, and his eyebrows raised and questioningly, and he answered in a very hesitant voice, "Ich come from Poland," and he mentioned some town there. I don't recall which one it was. I then asked him, "Wie lang seien ihr da?" Again he lifted his eyebrows and said, "Ich weiß nicht, kann sein ein Jahr, kann sein 2 Jahre, ein Tag ist wie ein anderer," and the frightened look seemed to have left his face, and then he asked me, "Sagt mir now, wer seid ihr? Ihr redt als a geschmacken Yiddish. Tell me, who are you? You speak such a good Jewish." I then turned to the men that were with me and told them, "Okay, guys, put up the rifles. I think we're okay." And turning back to Shmuel, I said, this time smiling slightly, "Ich bin a Yid echet. I'm a Jew also. Ich bin an Amerikaner Yid. Ich bin an Amerikaner Jiddischer Soldat, und ihr seid frei. I'm a Jew. I'm an American Jew. I'm an American Jewish soldier, and you are all free now." He looked at me with a puzzled look, not quite comprehending what I had told him, and he repeated, "An Amerikaner, an Amerikaner." And once again I told him, "Ich bin an Amerikaner Yid. Ich bin an Amerikaner Jiddischer Soldat, und ihr seid frei jetzt. Die Amerikaner seien da. I'm an American Jew, and I'm an American Jewish soldier, and you're free. The Americans are here." Suddenly he snapped out of his puzzlement and shouted out to the others, "The Amerikaner sind da! The Amerikaner sind da! The Americans are here! The Americans are here!" And at that point, the complete compound came running out towards us, where we were standing, and as we stood there, they were looking at us curiously, reaching out to touch us, and the children smiling up at us, each trying to hold our hands. They were all a pitiful sight to look at, almost skeleton, and in dire need of medical attention. We waved to them and tried to be as pleasant as possible under the circumstances, and turning to the others in the squad, I asked one of them to return to our base and tell Lieutenant Carroll, who was in charge of us, to call our company commander in Leipzig and report what we had come upon, and get the Red Cross and medical help, also food, hot food, for these unfortunate people. One of the members of our squad then turned to me and said, "You know, Gerenstein, if I didn't see this with my own eyes, I wouldn't believe you." Turning back to Shmuel, I told him, "Ich habe geschickt eine von uns zurück, zu bringen euch Hilfe, and zu bringen the Red Cross mit Essen, heiße Essen, for euch alle." I sent one of our men back to report this and to bring help and doctors, and the Red Cross to bring food, hot food for all of you. He looked at me with a sad look and replied, "Hashem dank euch zu alle, und a gesundheit Keppe. I thank you all, and God bless you." He then said to me, "Kommt mit mir, ich will euch zeigen, wo wir schlafen. Come with me. I want to show you where we sleep." I hesitated momentarily, and once again turning to the others in the squad, I said, "I'll be right back. Watch your backs," and we left. Regardless of the horrors of battle, nothing prepared those who fought in Europe for the experience of entering a concentration camp. Arriving at his barracks, I knew by the stench on the outside that I would be very uncomfortable on the inside. On entering, the stench became almost unbearable, but I steeled myself against it, and we started to walk through. Their sleeping quarters consisted of wooden plank with some straw on it as for mattress. A woman in one of the beds that looked like a skeleton, and I doubted whether she made it through until the next day. Meanwhile, the stench was taking its toll on me, and I knew I would have to get out of there, or else I was going to throw up. I then told Shmuel I had seen enough and I had to get outside for some air. We finally went out, and once more he said to me, "Kommt mit mir. Ich will euch zeigen etwas anderes. Come with me. I want to show you something else." So I followed him down a small path to another building with a large chimney, a little distance away from his barracks. As we entered, I immediately saw the ovens, the famous ovens, and I knew this was the crematorium that we had read about and also heard about. The doors were open, and there were still some charred bones in the ovens, and ashes also. At the sight, I was ready to throw up, in spite of the fact that I had seen dead soldiers and wounded soldiers, but I think this was about the last straw that I could take. But I managed to contain myself, and then I told Shmuel, "Ich muss gehen zurück jetzt." I had to get back to the others, and we left. When we arrived, the others were waiting there, and they were trying to speak to the others with hand motions, Mamelushon, and I told the men that had come with me that we had to get back. It was getting late, and we would have to leave soon. Once more I turned to Shmuel and asked him, "Was hat ihr zu essen?" "What have you got to eat?" As he shook his head and put his hand in his pocket, showing me a blackened piece of bread, saying, "Ich hab no das verfaulte Stickel Brot." I only have the stale piece of bread. I then turned to the men that were there and said, "Okay, guys, give me a K rations and break them open," as I did also, with our bayonets. and started to distribute the contents. There was small packages of cigarettes, which we gave to each of the males, as far as it would go. The cans of food, spam, meatballs, stews, cheeses, which he had shaved off pieces and gave it out as far as it lasted. And then there was the thick Hershey chocolate bars, and we shaved off pieces of little slices and distributed each little slice to the poor children as far as it lasted, until it was all gone. It was getting late now, and I realized I couldn't do any more than I had already done. And with the help that was soon coming, we pulled ourselves together and we started away from the crowd. And as we were about to leave, Shmuel pulled me aside. Once more, with a sad look on his face, he asked me to do him a favor, pulling out some papers from inside his shirt, and said, "Ich hab da geschrieben a Briefele zu mein Onkel in Amerika, und wohnt da," pointing to an address on the paper. "Efter ihr könnt das schicken zu ihm, ich hab das verbalten von der deutschen Soldaten, und ich hab geschrieben, als meine Familie ist alle zusammen." I wrote a letter to an uncle of mine in America, and I told him that my family is all together, and I hid this from the German soldiers. The address is here, pointing to the letter. I took the letter from him and assured him that I would mail it for him. I looked at it and saw that it was written in Jewish. I was able to make out some of the words, but couldn't make out the rest of it. It was addressed to a rabbi in Arizona. He thanked me 1,000,000 times, and again he said, "A gesunden neue Keppe, God bless you." And I told the others, "Let's go, we have to get back to our camp." As we were walking to the exit gate, with part of the camp following, Shmuel and I extended my hand to Shmuel, and we shook hands, and I said to Shmuel, "Efter wir wollen sich sehen in bessere Zeiten, aber für jetzt auf Wiedersehen. Perhaps we'll meet one day in better times, but for now, goodbye." And he replied with a saddened look, "Allewei, efter, aber jetzt geht Gesundheit und a schönem Dank zu euch alle, und a gesund neue Keppe. Shalom. I hope but for now. Go in good health, and God bless you all." And we turned and left. As we trudged back slowly to our command post, all in deep thought, I had a feeling of deep satisfaction, knowing that I had liberated a concentration camp. I say I, only because I could speak the language. We returned to our unit, and I asked the man that I had sent back to get help if he had done so, and he assured me that he had. And Lieutenant Carroll had called our company commander and relayed the message for help. Then I looked at the lieutenant and told him about the letter, and he assured me that there were no hidden secrets there, and all he said was, "Get it in an envelope, and I'll see that it gets through." I thanked him and said, "You just did a big mitzvah for a lot of people." He smiled at me and asked, "Is that good?" And I told him it was better than good. It was terrific. By the way, he was our census officer also. I immediately placed the letter in an envelope, and I wrote a letter to this rabbi, placing it in the same envelope with Shmuel's. I explained to him what our unit had done and gave our lieutenant the letter. He placed his stamp on it, and that's all it took. I tried to get back to the camp to see Shmuel, to tell him that I had mailed his letter, but the lieutenant said, "No way. You all will probably have to get booster shots of tetanus and typhoid and to get your bags packed." We were going back to rejoin the company in Leipzig. We arrived in Leipzig on May 2nd, 1945, and we were told, to find billets for ourselves and make ourselves ready for our regular work schedule as in the past. The war in Japan was still raging, and to prepare for being sent to the Pacific area. I was in Leipzig about a week when the company clerk came to my billet and told me there was a large package for me in the orderly room. I immediately went through to the orderly room, identified myself, and was handed a very large package, and it had a letter pasted on top of it. I noted that it was from the rabbi in Arizona, answering my letter, and also Shmuel's letter. On opening the box, it turned out to be the largest box of candy chocolates that I have ever seen, which I shared with the men in my company, and of course the men that had been with me at the concentration camp, thanking me and my comrades a million times for liberating part of his family, and knowing that what we had gone through to come to the camp, and liberating all the unfortunates that were interned there. Also for taking the time to send a letter from his nephew Shmuel to him. I cherished that letter and placed it in my barracks bag for safekeeping. On May 8th, the war in Europe was officially over, and now we were preparing for the Pacific area. My company was in Leipzig until the end of August, and fortunately the war in the Pacific was over in the middle of August, with the dropping of the atomic bomb on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. At the end of August, my company was told to fall out with all our equipment, and to our surprise, there was a complete battalion of Russian soldiers ready to occupy our billets. Then there was the system of points. If you had enough points, you were eligible for discharge. I had more than enough points to go home. I started throwing out a lot of junk that had accumulated in both my barracks bags, throwing out old letters and other non-essential items to make my bags lighter, and in throwing out things, to my dismay, I must have thrown out that kind letter from the rabbi in Arizona.
In conversations about the war, I'm asked many times, do I ever think of the people we had liberated? About the Shmuel. And what happened to him? Did he go back to his native country? Did he go back to the United States, perhaps to his uncle, the rabbi? And I can still see the surprise on his face when I told him I was an American Jewish soldier. However, there are certain regrets that I also have. One of which mainly was I had never thought of asking these people, would they like to say Kaddish for the ones that had lost their lives there. And the other, of course, due to the excitement and getting back to our camp, I had never taken the trouble to find out the name of the camp. I also remember Shmuel had shown me the numbers on his arms that the Germans had branded them with. I can still picture Shmuel standing in front of me, the surprised and puzzled look on his face, asking me, "Sag mir now, wer seid ihr? Ihr redet das a Geschmack in Yiddish. Who are you? You speak such a good Jewish." And I answering him in Jewish, Ich bin ein Yid. Ich bin ein Amerikaner, jüdischer Soldat. Und ihr seid frei. I am also a Jewish, and I am an American Jewish soldier, and you are now free. And in conclusion, if this is history, then I am part of that history and proud that I had served my country to accomplish this history. I thank you for listening.